Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us for another story here at Annie Narrates. Today's story's title goes like this. Husband refused to forgive me because of a misunderstanding and served me divorce, but years later he found out the truth and showed up at my house. I give him a big surprise and tell him to get out. Paul and I were married for 8 years. When I got married to Paul, I had to leave my hometown behind and move to his house. As partners, we complemented each other excellently, both sharing the same desire to build a family. Paul's work made him travel a lot, and there were many nights I had to spend all alone in our home. My parents died when I was very young, and my grandparents lived far away, so I was alone in the city. I was lucky to have Paul's family with me. They treated me like their own daughter, and Paul's brother Ben became a good friend to me. My husband seldom spent time at home and was out working in different locations for months at a time, so I became very close with his family. His mom and I used to go shopping together. His dad lent a helping hand whenever plumbing issues or car troubles arose, and his brother Ben introduced me to his friends so I would not feel lonely in the city anymore. I began to embrace the city more every day and shared all my experiences with Paul whenever he returned home. He appreciated my enthusiasm, but felt uneasy whenever I brought up his brother Ben. You see, Paul and Ben never got along well. Paul was a year older than Ben, and their stranded relationship dated back to college. In those days, Ben harbored feelings for a girl named Lily and used to talk about asking her out all the time. One day, he discovered Paul and Lily making out with each other, which broke his heart. Despite the pain, Ben chose to keep it to himself, allowing Paul and Lily to start dating formally. However, 6 months later, Paul cheated on Lily, shocking everyone. According to their parents, Ben confronted Paul about it, and they had a huge fight regarding this. Their relationship didn't remain the same after that. On the one hand, Paul felt that Ben never completely forgave him after all these years, while Ben, on the other hand, believed that Paul had overstepped boundaries by pursuing someone he had feelings for. Paul occasionally advised me against spending too much time with Ben, but I tried to make him see that I felt isolated in the city and had no one else to turn to. I loved Paul with all my heart, and I wished his job would permit him to stay with me, allowing us to share more moments together. During his brief visits home, we made the most of our time, savoring each moment we could spend together. One day, I discovered that I was pregnant. I was beyond overjoyed because there was nothing that I looked forward to more than being a mother. This is what Paul and I had always dreamt about. I immediately shared the news with the family and devised a plan to reveal it to Paul. We decided to wait for his upcoming visit home, planning a surprise party to welcome him home and witness his heartfelt reaction. On the day Paul was to arrive back home, his mother and I had decorated the entire house for the party. We had invited some close family members and friends to join us. I was so excited to give the happy news to my dear husband. When Paul arrived, he was greeted with cheerful shouts of surprise and a burst of colorful confetti. His eyes widened and a big grin spread across his face as he took in the festive atmosphere. It had been a while since he had his friends, so he seemed overjoyed meeting them. During the party, I decided to make the pregnancy announcement a moment to remember. I asked everyone to gather around as I held up a tiny pair of baby booties. The room fell silent as they connected the dots, and Paul's eyes met mine. I could see the realization dawn on him, and a mix of surprise and pure happiness illuminated his face. The room was filled with laughter and joy as everyone started congratulating us on the upcoming addition to our family. Paul hugged me and seemed overjoyed with the news. Everyone continued celebrating the impending arrival of our little one. Amidst the laughter and cheers, Paul gently took me aside. His eyes, filled with a mix of excitement and anticipation, locked into mine. In a surprisingly serious tone, he asked me if the child was his. At first, I thought he might be teasing me, and I started laughing, surprised. However, as he repeated the question while holding my arms, I realized he was serious. I assured him that the child was undoubtedly his. I reminded him that we had slept together 2 months ago before he left for work, and according to my pregnancy result from the hospital, I was exactly 2 months pregnant. Last month, when I missed my periods, I didn't think much about it as I suffer from PCOS, which causes irregular periods. When I didn't have periods again this month, I visited my gynecologist where I was informed that I was in fact pregnant, which explained the absence of my periods for 2 months. I couldn't understand why Paul was even questioning me about this, but after I explained this to him, he seemed relieved. His expression shifted from uncertainty to sheer delight. The party resumed with renewed enthusiasm, and we basked in the warmth of our shared happiness. As the days went on and the miracle of new life unfolded within me, I was excited to welcome our baby into the world. Paul and I decided not to find out the gender simply because it didn't matter much to us. We spent time discussing potential baby names, enjoying the excitement of choosing one together. With the help of Paul's family, I slowly prepared the baby's room and shopped for various baby essentials. I wanted to ensure that everything was ready for the baby's arrival. Months swept by, and as the due date approached, I consistently reminded Paul that the moment of childbirth could be imminent. The fear of being alone during labor lingered in my thoughts, but Paul assured me that he would return home before my due date. Fate, however, had other plans, and I found myself in labor 2 days earlier than expected. Paul's family provided the support that I needed, driving me to the hospital, and his mother stayed by my side in the delivery room when I gave birth. As I cradled our newborn, I couldn't help but wonder if Paul would regret missing the birth of our child, an event we had eagerly anticipated together. Paul arrived the next day, and he rushed in to hug me and our child. He kept apologizing for not being there for me in the delivery room. I was just happy to have my husband back with us. He marveled at our newborn, holding our child with a mix of awe and tenderness. In the days that followed, Paul took paternity leave so he could become an active participant in every aspect of caring for our little one. Late-night feedings, soothing lullabies, and diaper duty became shared responsibilities. We navigated the challenges and joys of parenthood as a united front. As the months rolled by, witnessing David's growth was a delight. Newborns, with their still evolving features, gradually revealed their unique characteristics. With each passing month, I could observe his hair took on the same shade of brown as Paul's parents, a beautiful blend of his family traits. However, an unsettling change emerged in Paul's behavior. He started to withdraw from spending time with our child, opting for solitude outdoors even when he returned home from work. During a visit from Ben, Paul made a peculiar comment that caught me off guard. He jokingly remarked that David resembled Ben more than him. Shocked, I looked up expecting it to be a jest. Ben seemed uncomfortable, unsure how to respond. I questioned Paul about what he meant by that comment, but he dismissed it, saying it was just a joke. The air thickened with tension, and I walked out of the room furious. Shortly after, Ben departed, and I decided to confront Paul about his joke. Determined, I faced him and questioned the inappropriate joke he made in front of his brother. Paul tried to pass it off as a joke again, but I asked him firmly if there was something on his mind. To my disbelief, Paul confessed that he didn't believe David was his child. I gazed at him in shock, wondering if he had lost his senses. Paul continued accusing me that David didn't look anything like him and that he had brown hair. In response, I pointed out that his parents also had brown hair, sarcastically asking if that meant that I had an affair with his mother. Paul's anger flared, and he started shouting absurd accusations that I was sleeping with Ben. My eyes widened at the sheer absurdity of his claims. I couldn't fathom why Paul entertained such thoughts. Regrettably, this marked the beginning of the end for us. Paul distanced himself from David and me, refusing to engage or spend time together. It shattered me to see our child yearning for his father, while Paul remained steadfast in his unfounded suspicions. Every time he went away for work and came back home after months, he was even more suspicious of me. In a final attempt to salvage our unraveling relationship, I turned to Paul's parents. Tears streamed down my face as I revealed their son's baseless accusations. The shock mirrored on their faces mirrored my own disbelief. Ben, having overheard, was appalled that his brother could entertain such thoughts. It was he who insisted that we confront Paul about these absurd allegations, and his father agreed. The next time Paul returned home, his parents and Ben joined us for dinner to address the issues and, hopefully, reason with him. Regrettably, the conversation didn't unfold as anticipated, leading to further complications. Paul erupted in anger, vehemently screaming at everyone that he wasn't the father of our child and that I was nothing but a quote-unquote dirty whore who had slept with his brother. I was deeply embarrassed, tears streaming down my face, while his parents stood up to console me. Ben, furious, retaliated, rebuking Paul that he should not talk about me this way. The heated argument between Paul and Ben escalated into a physical brawl, the frustration turning into wild swings and shoves. I stood there, horrified, as the two brothers grappled with each other, fueled by anger and resentment. It was a heartbreaking sight, witnessing a family break down into such a chaos. When their father intervened to break up the fight, I noticed Paul was bleeding from his nose and rushed to help him. He looked at me with undisguised disgust and forcefully shoved me aside. His parents gasped, witnessing the extent of his disdain. Paul then pointed an accusing finger at me, blaming me for involving his parents and creating this huge mess. He argued that if our child was truly his, I should have addressed the issue privately instead of bringing his entire family into it. Pleading with him, I suggested a paternity test to resolve the doubts, but Paul staunchly refused and stormed out of the house. That was the day that marked the end of our story. A month later, his lawyers delivered divorce papers alleging that I had an affair, which was grounds for a separation. Words are not enough for me to describe the pain that I felt during the time, witnessing the love of my life, my best friend, and my husband accusing me of such a heinous act shattered me completely. The divorce papers mandated my departure from our shared home. Despite his parents urging me to fight back, I felt I had lost everything. I didn't see the point of convincing him any further when my previous attempts had been futile. If divorcing me over a misunderstanding would make him happy, then I would grant him his last wish. I signed the divorce papers and decided to relocate to my grandparents' house in my hometown. Not once did I seek child support or any financial assistance from the divorce. His parents begged me to stay with them, but I knew this would cause Paul further pain. As Ben drove me and David to the airport, he wept uncontrollably, offering profuse apologies on his brother's behalf. Deep down, I knew it wasn't Ben's or his parents' fault, but Paul's behavior. I held on to the hope that one day, Paul would recognize his mistakes. 9 years have passed since our divorce, and in that time, I've witnessed our child David grow into a handsome young boy. His laughter mirrors his father's, tugging at my heart and occasionally making me miss Paul. Memories haven't faded. Instead, time has softened their sharp edges. Throughout these years, my grandparents have been my unwavering support, standing by me for all these years. I worked hard to find a job and presently hold a steady job with a good income, allowing me to provide for both my grandparents and David. It's a relief that David doesn't remember Paul and has never asked about his father. He simply sees me and his grandparents as his family and seems content. If in the future he becomes curious as he grows up, I'll have that conversation with him. Right now, my main goal is to let him enjoy his childhood. Throughout the years, Paul's parents have made an effort to stay connected with me. Though our communication is limited, I make sure to share a photo of David with them each year on his birthday, and occasionally, we have video calls so they can check in on him. I have introduced Paul's parents to David as a part of our family without going into any details. After my divorce from Paul, dating wasn't really on my radar. My focus was on my career and being there for David as much as possible. Despite my grandparents' encouragement to meet new people, I have been hesitant to open myself up to love again. However, a few months ago, my old friend Oliver returned to town. We used to date in college, and people always thought that we would end up getting married. However, it never happened. Oliver asked me out for lunch one day when he found out that I was back in our hometown. He wanted to catch up with me after all these years. I agreed, and to my surprise, we had a wonderful time together. Being around him felt easy, and I found myself sharing details about my past, including my divorce. When he learned about Paul's unfounded beliefs, he was genuinely shocked. It felt refreshing to talk to someone who understood me and talked with me without any judgment. Eventually, we spent more and more time together and started to officially go out. A month ago, I got a wedding invite from Ben, my ex-husband's brother, and it was a pleasant surprise to learn that he was getting married. Although I initially hesitated because I knew Paul would be present, Ben insisted that it had been too long since he saw his nephew and urged me to attend. Even his parents convinced me that enough time has passed and Paul had moved on. Relenting after their persuasion, I asked Ben if I could bring a +1, not wanting to attend his wedding solo. Ben readily agreed, expressing his happiness that I would be there to share in his joyous day. So, David, Oliver, and I flew together to attend Ben's wedding. I was genuinely delighted to reunite with his parents and extended family. They warmly embraced me and David, expressing joy at seeing David all grown up and noting the resemblance to Paul. I felt sad hearing their remarks, but I didn't want my son to get curious about it, so I quickly changed the topic. I didn't want to dwell on the past and spoil our time together. On Ben's wedding day, we witnessed him exchanging vows, and I couldn't help but feel proud and happy for him. During the ceremony, I noticed Paul gazing intently at me and David. He was standing with a new woman by his side. Politely, I smiled at him and then shifted my focus to the wedding ceremony. As the wedding moved to the reception, Oliver and David headed to get some food. They were hungry and were eager to fill their plates with the delicious offerings at the reception. I found myself alone at our table when Paul unexpectedly approached. An awkward exchange followed as he greeted me, looking noticeably thinner, with more wrinkles than I remembered. Politely, he inquired about my well-being, and I noted, stating that I was doing okay. He then pointed to Oliver standing with David, asking who he was. I casually mentioned he was my boyfriend. Paul smirked and commented on how David had grown up. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach as I anticipated what he was about to say. Paul started questioning why I hadn't stayed in contact with him. I reminded him that he divorced me and asked me to leave his house, so why should he expect me to stay in touch with him? He then pointed out that David looked a lot like him. Irritated, I responded, "Obviously, Paul, children tend to resemble their parents." Eager to avoid further conversation, I stood up and headed to meet Oliver and David. I asked if it was okay for us to leave the wedding, and though surprised, they agreed. I congratulated Ben once more, apologizing for our early departure, and he understood. We left, spending the rest of the day in the city with a long drive and some ice cream. Upon returning home, I felt a sense of relief. Although I harbored no resentment towards Paul, seeing him after all these years stirred up the unpleasant memories of our divorce. Life seemed to return to normal after returning from Ben's wedding, or at least, I thought so. Until today, when there was a knock at our door. A whirlwind of emotions hit me as I opened the door to find Paul standing on my doorstep after 9 long years. Confusion clouded my mind at seeing him there. Before I could voice my questions, he broke the silence. "I have realized the truth," he confessed, his voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. "I realized that I was wrong, and you were speaking the truth. I am sorry that I didn't believe you then." I stared at him blankly and asked him to clarify what he meant by that. He explained that upon seeing David all grown up during Ben's wedding, he finally realized that David was indeed his son. He looked exactly like him. Sleepless nights had haunted him since then, driving him to come here and extend his heartfelt apology. His words hung in the air, and a montage of memories flickered before my eyes. A bittersweet reminder of what was lost. With calm resolve, I met his gaze and responded, "I appreciate your apology, Paul. The truth is, perhaps I can forgive you for how you treated me, but I can't forgive you for abandoning our son when we needed you the most. No amount of apology can erase that pain. I don't know what you're doing here after all these years, but I suggest that you leave my property immediately." His eyes widened in disbelief, and he began apologizing profusely. Tears streamed down his face as he started to admit that he was jealous of the close relationship I had with his brother, leading him to make wrongful assumptions. Now, with David all grown up, he could see that he was indeed the father and regretted divorcing me. I looked at him without an ounce of sympathy and asked him to leave before my son returned from school. I didn't want David to witness this, and I was not ready to explain the appalling actions of his father from 9 years ago and traumatize my son. Paul continued to beg, but I stood firm, warning him that I would involve the police if he didn't leave. I closed the door, leaving him on the threshold of a past that no longer had a place in my present. As he drove away, tears still streaming down his face, I couldn't fathom what made him believe he could waltz into our lives after abandoning us for years with just an apology. When I told my grandparents tonight about Paul turning up at our doorstep and apologizing to me. I expected them to support me. Instead, they are insistent that this is a good time for me to tell David the truth and forgive Paul for the sake of the child. Their perspective is making me feel conflicted about my decision. Was I the a-hole for asking my ex-husband to leave after he came begging for an apology after 9 years? I certainly did not expect this to blow up the way that it did. I have tried to read as much as I can, and I am grateful for all your advice and support. Paul has persistently tried to reach out to me over calls and texts since he came to visit me, urging to meet up with him so we can discuss this further. I have asked him to give me some time and space, and he has agreed. I took the advice of everyone around me and had a heartfelt conversation with my grandparents to grasp why they were urging me to forgive Paul. I questioned them about whether they truly believed it was the right time to reveal the truth to David, who is just 9 years old, about his father. I shared the painful memories of Paul's behavior and how he humiliated me in front of his family with his unfounded accusations before divorcing me and leaving me with nothing. Expressing what I went through seemed to make them understand my perspective a bit more, and they immediately apologized for overstepping their bounds. Since the last few days, I've come to realize that I haven't been handling my emotions well. I know there will come a day when I have to tell David the truth, but before that, I want to be in a place where I can manage my emotions effectively. That's why I have decided to seek therapy, with the goal of coming to terms with everything that happened to me. It's been 2 months since my last update, and a lot has happened since. First of all, I did go for therapy, as I had mentioned before. Through these sessions, I found a space to unravel the knots of my emotions. The process has been like opening windows to let in fresh air, allowing me to confront, understand, and manage my feelings more effectively. Therapy has become a guide, helping me navigate through the complexities of my past. Secondly, I finally sat down and had an honest talk with my son David. Keeping it simple, I explained that his dad Paul had some misunderstandings in the past regarding my pregnancy that caused our separation. I made sure to reassure him that this happened a long time ago, and I didn't resent his father for this. I shared that Paul had reached out to me after Ben's wedding and apologized for his behavior. I could see the curiosity in David's eyes, and I knew that he had a million questions for me. I answered his questions honestly, steering clear of unnecessary details. I emphasized that this was completely up to him if he wanted to have a relationship with his father. David told me that he is uncomfortable meeting his dad for now. I assured David that his feelings were completely valid and that he had the autonomy to decide whatever he wanted to do from now onwards. Since then, we have continued having several conversations, discussing his emotions and allowing him to express any concerns or thoughts he has about the situation. I am also considering enrolling David in therapy classes. It could provide him with a much more supportive environment to express his feelings freely, navigate the complex emotions, and develop coping mechanisms. Paul occasionally reaches out, sincerely expressing his desire to foster a relationship with David. His repeated apologies reflect a genuine acknowledgement of the mistakes he had made in the past. As for me and Oliver, things have been going strong for us. He is aware that Paul sometimes tries to reach out to me regarding David and is supportive of whatever decision I make. Our relationship is going well, and we have learned to navigate the complexities of the past through open communication. It's reassuring to have someone by my side who respects my choices and encourages the well-being of our family. Since my last update, something incredible has happened. David finally met his father Paul. You see, David's curiosity about his father grew over time. He found himself wondering about the man he heard stories about but never really knew. The honest conversations we had at home, coupled with Paul's sincere apologies towards me, planted a seed of curiosity in David's mind. Eventually, he opened up to me that meeting his dad might answer lingering questions he had and provide a chance to understand his family roots better. I agreed and reached out to Paul, who was beyond overjoyed at the prospect of meeting his son formally for the first time since David found out about him. He asked if he should bring something for David, but I thought it would be best to keep it simple, so I suggested just getting some chocolates. We met at a diner last weekend. When Paul walked in, there were nervous smiles and tentative hellos exchanged. The air was a bit awkward as David eyed Paul, understandably cautious. Paul gave David the chocolates he bought, which seemed to warm him up a bit. As our conversation unfolded, we talked about easy things like David's hobbies, favorite school subjects, and friends. Paul genuinely seemed interested in getting to know David, and overall, it felt like a positive step. After our talk, Paul pulled me aside as we were about to leave, offering a heartfelt apology once more. I smiled and told him I was just happy that David was getting to know his father. I reminded him firmly to be a better father this time. Paul nodded graciously, and we left it at that. We have chosen to take it slow, allowing both father and son to build a relationship at their own pace. I hope that with time we can all heal from our past and form meaningful connections. As David's mother, I remain steadfast in supporting his decisions throughout this journey. Alright guys, that was a wrap up for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Go ahead and smash that like button for me and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again. We will be seeing you in the next one.